he mentions too, the character disturbed people, they know what they're doing. He goes, you can't even, because that's where he started it from. He's like, oh, do they know what they're doing? Do they know what's going on? And he said, yes, they absolutely know. They absolutely know. They'll say, I don't know, to get you off the scent, but they do know. And some of the more effective manipulators, and we see them in some of the space. We see them probably amongst even some of the self-aware narcissists too, where it's like, oh, I was just so traumatized. I'm so traumatized that I just can't help myself but to blame others and be abusive and do all of these things. And it's like, actually, that's BS. It's like, not everyone who's traumatized is abusive. Not everyone who traumatizes is extremely manipulative. Not everyone who's traumatized blames everyone else except for themselves. So like, when you really cut it down like that, it's like that childhood trauma stuff is BS. It's like, yes, it can make it worse, but it's not the cause. And that's because you can tell that's the difference. And so I'm a believer now in the either whether it's genetics or epigenetic part, but I was like, yeah, I can see. And when you break it down like that, and you really got to understand just character in general, that's something our space doesn't talk about very much. But like, are you a good person? And he said the big problem for character disorder people like narcissists is they are totally okay being a douche. Like they don't have that like, oh, I just clowned this person over. Oh, I just cheated. I just lied. I did something terrible. They don't care. Like they know they're doing it. But if you can teach them some character, it might be able to, like the way I say, practice radical self-respect can protect people from narcissists and other character disturbed people. Perhaps teaching them character can prevent them from doing from some of the more hurtful and harmful things. Because if they know, that's also a clue they might be able to be helped. Like if they know, it's possible to help them. If they don't know, then that's actually more of an argument for they're impossible to be helped. If they don't know what's going on, oh, how do you help someone who doesn't know what's going on? You can try to teach them self-awareness, but how effective would that be? But when they do too know, and again, this is where the people who go struggle with addictions and things, like their manipulations to get drugs, their lies to get drugs and do whatever it takes to get one more. That is more similar to me than something that narcissistic people would do. Like the narcissistic person just wants money, power, control, sex, whatever. The addict wants drugs or whatever their drug of choice is. And they know when they're lying. They know when they're manipulating. They know when they're trying to screw somebody over to get one more. So, but the very fact that they know, that's the opportunity that maybe they can change. If you know, there's a possibility for change. But I would never take someone's word for it. It doesn't mean like, oh yeah, you know, that means they're going to change. Absolutely not. Like just because you know doesn't mean you will. You have to believe whatever change in their actions first and foremost. You can't believe what they're going to say. So all these things to take into consideration. But like I said, I'm excited to reread this book here because it's a component you don't hear too much of.
You know what's so wild about this? So Peggy said to me, what I will never forget this. One day while we were out on a walk, he says to me, you know what? Why do narcissists get such a bad rep? You know, we were traumatized too. And I was like, yes, he did. This is when I started to clue in really hard about his awareness of his things. And I said, what? And he's like, well, seriously, he's like, narcissists were traumatized too. You know, like I went through a whole bunch, and he's like, you have trauma and you're getting all this fucking sympathy. You know, what about me? And I looked at him right in the face and I said, dude, because I do not ever intentionally want to harm another person for power and control. That is like at a baseline, that is what separates you from me. And this is why you get a bad rep, is because you intentionally, knowingly go and steamroll people to get what you want.
So he knew he was like, a narcissistic person? He knew he was a narcissistic person?
Yes.
Aha. So another thing Dr. George Simon says, he goes, a lot of narcissistic people, they will exaggerate greatly the effect to the extent they've been traumatized as a kid. They will exaggerate that greatly while simultaneously downplaying how terrible they treat people in the present. And
I
again,
really hope that's not true, but it probably is because I mean, I would never discuss this like openly like. But the things that he's gone through, that was one of the reasons why I was so ready, able to like be there with him because I really loved him and I knew like he opened up to me about the things that had happened to him and it was horrific. Like it was some of the most horrific trauma I've ever heard of. And that's the thing, like his story and my other ex, I don't have a code name for him, but they both went through the most horrific trauma.
Now, granted, some of them do go through trauma,
Right.
right? Some of them absolutely do. He's just saying some of them have the capacity to greatly exaggerate. Now, there's people who have been through SA that I do see them, and they do act pretty similar to a lot of narcissists, if not be narcissistic themselves. That does happen too. So I think what happens a little bit, though, also is exactly what he did. He was jealous of the impact and how people treated maybe you because of it. So he was envious of how people were giving you sympathy or what attention or whatever for it. And that's the character disturbed part right there. Wanting that part. Oh, I'm jealous of how people are treating you because of what happened to you. That's when you're getting a little off the rocker there when they do that. Not good.
Yeah, it was very much he loved who I was and what I stood for. And like all of his friends called, my nickname was the light. I was called the light. You are our light. And for him, it was very purposeful until I started to get a lot more attention than he did. So it was like, because I was the person that would always respond to the text messages because I didn't feel entitled to leave people on read. Like he felt entitled to do whatever he wanted to do. And so people kind of were like, okay, well, I guess he's not, responding to us, like little baseline things like this. And so they would come to me and I would respond and I would actually engage. And one of the things that I said at the very end, that really was really painful for me because I really cared about these people, is I said, you know what pisses me off? I guarantee you, if you sat me down in a room with all of his friends that became my friends, I would be able to tell you 10 times the things about them, like their family, the things they care about, the things about their personality, like their favorite food. I would have all of that in my head because I actually cared about them and cared about connecting with them. Whereas him, he didn't care. It was just like, as long as they served a purpose. So he did become very angry and resentful towards the end because he wanted all of that supply for him. Like he even said, it's always someone else. And I was like, it's always you. Like if it's not you, you freak out. And he was like, well, it should always be about me. Like it should always be about me. Because he really believed it should.
And he literally said that.
Yes.
He wants to use people as tools and exploit them for supply. Right? And if you listen to them, they'll tell on themselves. Like once people understand the core traits and what people are like,
yeah,
it doesn't take long. It doesn't take long to see the common themes come up, whether they're bulldozing boundaries or disproportionately reacting or extreme black and white or blame, or whatever it is, right? It's once you recognize it, it's easier to see. The problem for people is, I guess the one problem people have is the differentiation between the grandiose and the covert.
Yes.
Like sometimes if it's a grandiose, they can see that. But the covert ones, a little slicker. They're a little slicker. They'll slip under the radar there with their cognitive empathy and saying the right things and often be more soft-spoken. But, for them, it's harder to pinpoint it with them. But what I would still say, I still have like a quote-unquote narcissism test. which is like when I first started doing this, it's the only reason why I like kept on going, was because I came up with this. I called it a simple test for narcissism. And the test was to tell them no, to
Yeah.
disagree with them, have a different opinion, share a different perspective, or like have a boundary and see how they act. Because most narcissistic people, because they're sensitive to criticism, will lose it in those
Yep.
ways. They're not going to be able to handle it. They're not going to be able to respect your boundary. They're not going to be able to tolerate if you have a different opinion without belittling, criticizing, devaluing. And it's just a simple one, but almost all narcissists will have that sensitivity to criticism. Like I've never seen one that didn't. So it's just a matter of which one. Like it's the behaviors may look different, but they're all going to have that. And they're all going to have that grandiosity, and they're all going to have the entitlement.
Oh, you mean how my dumbass at the start of the love bombing with Peggy, he flat out told me that he was motivated by the word no. And so I was like, "Oh wow,
Motivated.
like he's in business and he's successful. Like I guess he's just like really motivated." And then, like what you were saying about how they tell on themselves as the relationship progressed. And of course, because I was in like close proximity with him, given that I was an immigrant, it was the pandemic. So I would just like sit at the table and stare at him and listen to all the shit he was doing. And over time, I was like, oh my God, this isn't about being motivated by the word no. He literally blows a gasket when someone tells him no, like over anything. And then they become, then he splits and they become all bad. And one of his favorite things to say was, "Oh, I'm going to go nuclear on this person." I was almost like, "Oh my God, what the
Dangling the
hell does
no.
that mean?"
Picture like a horse and carriage there with like a dangling of the word no in front of him. That's his best motivator. Right?
But he would lose it. Like he lost it during the pandemic when they put the implemented rules around the haircut stuff, like the hair salons weren't allowed to be open, and he was losing his mind that he had his haircut. And I remember he phoned me and he was having a meltdown. And he's like, "Oh, it's all her fault that she won't give me a haircut." I said, "Peggy, she could lose her business license. Like that's a big deal. Like you can't put that on her." And in his mind, she should do that for him because he's entitled to a haircut. Like it was I couldn't wrap my head around it, but I can't because I
No, they're just going to be different. They're just going to be
yeah.
different. And that's just how it's going to be. Like other people who don't know it. But it is just one of those things that
It
other
is.
people, until you see it, it's going to be difficult for them.